Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I'm guessing today is the day where everybody's asking me about bail springs. So we started with David doing the two different types of setups. He had a Shakespeare and he had an Okuma reel. They use the bail springs that you're finding in the more modern reels, and those there's a coil, kind of a spring located in a carrier, and there is also a spring that's a kind of a V-shaped spring. We showed how to set those, the V-shaped one being on the Shimano and the coil one being on the Okuma. And now we're going to show you the vintage spring, because somebody's got a Mitchell 304 out there and wants to know how to set that spring. So let's go ahead and do that for you. I'm not sure if this bail works. Oh yeah, it works. Okay. All right. So I like to work on bail springs by taking the assembly, the rotor assembly, off. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to remove the knob, and I'm going to remove the spool. And this one's an old one. It hasn't been touched, and it's a little bit beat up at the moment. That's okay. Eventually I'll get there. And in order to remove this this assembly, you need to take the axle shaft off. That involves taking the side plate off. And that involves taking a micro driver, because the slots on there are relatively small. It's always good to have a set of tools. This is a very inexpensive micro driver set from, I believe it's Harbor Freight. You don't have to have expensive tools, but you need to have the right tools. Of course, the expensive ones will last longer, but if you're doing a one-time service and repair, you don't need to invest as if it's something that you're going to use on a daily basis to earn a living, right? Okay, there's 3 of these screws. We're going to take those out. And we'll be able to remove that axle shaft and the rotor. Probably should do a full service on this reel. There's a video out there about the full service on this reel. This one clearly is just loaded with old grease. It looks like the original Mitchell grease too. Interesting. There's 2 screws that hold that crosswind block on, so let's get those out. And quite honestly, you can see how the service goes just because you have to take everything off to do the bail. So, well, some people prefer to just do the bail in place. It's not the way that I like to do it, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done that way. I just like to go ahead and take the whole piece off. I'm putting those pieces of parts into a parts tray. That way I know where they are when I go to reinstall. All right, with the 2 screws removed, you can remove the axle shaft. You don't want to lose that little crosswind block there, so take that out. And not now, but later I'll come back in and I'll clean all of that up. I'll do that with a series of paper towels, cotton swabs to get that old grease out of there. Probably some penetrating oils and the like. But for now, we're just going to leave that as it is. When you come up top here, then you're going to see the nut that needs to be removed for the rotor. You're also going to see the trip mechanism. When I do this, I take the trip mechanism out. So let's do that right now. Check the orientation on your trip mechanism, and I always recommend, if you don't know what you're doing, or if it's new to you, please take pictures along the way. It's easy enough to trust your memory as to how that spring works, and it's easy enough to get confused and lost in the process. So let's take this out, and we'll show you behind here that spring is wrapped around the post on the trip lever, and just like that, you can get out of sorts if you don't remember. This hook side is to the downside of the assembly. Okay, take that out. I have to stop the video here because I need to get the driver for the rest of the nut here. Okay, I got a nut driver here. You can use a socket, that's fine. You have to clear the bowl. This one is a US 5/16. I suspect this is a metric wrench nut, but it works. So let's go ahead and take that nut off. And leave it in the driver for now. Notice that there's a clip here that goes on top, and that clip faces up. I'm going to put that orientation right into there, and now we should be able to remove the rotor. Underneath the rotor, we'll go clean that up. We'll clean this up. There's also a lot of dirt and junk inside here. That's where I use a penetrating oil just to help grab the dirt and the like. And as I mentioned, I might as well tune this reel up. It's just a reel that I've had in a parts case for a while. I'm not sure why, probably just because it got old. And doesn't hurt to go ahead and get that fixed. There's a shim washer that I just knocked off there, so let's go put that right into the tray before we lose that. And I'll just grab a paper towel to clean that up before we get to do that bail. Alright, that's pretty much got all the dirt and sawdust or whatever else happened to be in there. I'm not quite sure where this reel was installed. I'm going to put the nut driver with the nut in there. Now we're going to take off the bail wire. Generally speaking, I don't like to wrestle bail wires, but in this case it's a single bail, so you really don't have much of an option there. Underneath the bail is going to be the spring that drives this. And I think that's probably where we are right now with the fellow that's asking this question about how to install the bail spring on this one. Okay, so this is probably where they are at the moment. We have a rotor, we have a bail spring, we have a bail wire, we have a bail nut, and we have a lot of grease in here. So let's get that out of there while we're at it. Okay, so the bail spring itself is a 3-coil spring. On one side it has a flat at a 90-degree angle, and on the other side it has a protruding 90-degree angle out. Find in the case the slot on the side of the case, right here. Oh, can't use that as a pointer with a hunk of grease on there. Right there, that slot there. And then take the one that is extending straight out and place the spring there and over the stud. So we've got the spring is in the housing now. Here's your 90-degree angle of the spring sitting out right now. That's the way you start this. Now a lot of people wonder why I take the catch mechanism out, the trip lever. And that's because to set this, you want to take all of the pressure off of this bail wire. While I'm doing this, there's some junk on there. Let's see if I can clean that up a little bit. And you're going to notice on the back end of this, and it's not just this reel, there's other reels in the Mitchell family that have this, there's a little stud that's going to keep that spring in the channel right there. And a lot of people struggle with that. Well, the way that I do this is I take all of the pressure off, and in order to take all of the pressure off this bail, you gotta kind of do it in a relaxed fashion. So I'll take the wire that goes in the hole, and then I'll tuck that little tab inside the spring, and look where we are. We're nowhere near where this needs to be set, but that's okay. Next up, we're going to take the spring of the bail. It's going to hold it all down. I said spring, I meant screw. And just get it started. Now, if you're not working on the reel with the trip lever, sometimes you have a hurdle to clear, and it's right here. You'll see we have the hurdle here. We have an indent, and then we have the catch on the back end here. That's why I don't tighten that screw all the way down. I keep the spring engaged until I can rotate that over that little hump there, and now I can tighten it down. With that tightened down, I can come over to the other side and put that end of the bail wire in. And then we can give it a test to see if we've got the spring done right. This one happens to have a little cup on it. So if you have a question like the question that just came in about how to set this, just leave it in the comment section. I'll try to do my best to help you get those answered. Okay, this should just trip now. Here you go, we have a functioning bail. But what we don't have, again, of course, is the trip lever. So we want to take the trip lever that we removed. Again, if your spring came off, and this one's pretty tight around that pivot point there, but if your spring came off, just remember the orientation of it. If you don't remember, go back to your pictures. We're going to find the slot in the case now. We're going to work that down and up, just like that. And then we're going to align the hole in the case with that hole in that trip lever. Okay, let's see if we can get this thing started the other way. There we go. So we're started there. Now that has a shoulder on it, and I'm not in that hole yet, so you just have to kind of back it off a little bit and make sure that you can align it so that that screw gets fully tightened down. Okay, I'm thinking that I probably didn't review this step, so I just took a moment here. When you're loading that spring, make sure that the tag end of that spring is below the block here as you're inserting this little arm in. So it's very important. You'll have the rounded end of the tip of the spring there. It wraps around the stud, and that stud arm, hopefully you can see it this way, that stud arm spring, there's a block that it rides on here. Very important to make sure that the spring is on this side when you go to tighten down that arm assembly. Okay, with that said, we should be able to lock in now. And when that's tripped, and I'm not going to trip it from the inside because it's going to break my fingers, but when it trips, it'll fire back now. Okay, that is essentially the way to set that bail. Now we'll just close this up just for now. I'll come right back in and do it in a moment. But I'm going to put the bail on here so that you see it fire. We'll take the assembly first. There's that little shim washer that goes on the top and the little shim washer that goes on the bottom of that trip ramp. That's one. That's two. Here's your trip ramp. There's a flat side on your axle shaft, so find that so that you can align it with the ramp. I already have that nut driver in here, so hopefully we'll be able to just transfer it and I don't have to fish it out anywhere. No, I guess that's not going to be the case. Okay, then get that nut that was stuck in the nut driver. Go ahead and put that on. And this will show you internally how that trip ramp is going to trip that bail mechanism. So the dog comes out, the rotor is going to spin, it's going to hit the tip of that trip ramp, and there you go. So it goes around, hits that little elbow, trips. Goes around, hits the elbow, trips. Okay, that's how you do it, or at least that's how I do it. So let's just kind of do a quick review here. Opened up the whole reel. You might as well service the reel if you're going to deal with the bail spring replacement, because the best way that I find, and again you may be able and be comfortable to work with it on the reel itself, I find is to remove all of the rotor and parts. So I take that off by starting with removing the rotor. In order to do that, I've got to remove the axle shaft The axle shaft is held on by the crosswind block, and you can only access that by removing the gear side plate. Once I remove the axle shaft, I have access to that nut. I did mention I have a 5/16 US nut driver. I'm sure that's a metric, and it probably is a, I don't know, an 8mm maybe. It could be a 7 maybe, I don't know. So we remove the assembly. We take pictures along the way so that we know how the spring loads, because I want to remove the trip lever in addition to removing the rotor. So I take the pieces off, I pull the rotor off of the reel, then I remove the trip lever and the associated spring. That's going to enable me to take this bail and set it by backing it off completely, totally relaxed, so that I can insert the spring tab into the hole of the bail and the pin that holds inside that coil. Get that loaded properly, tighten down the spring till it catches, rotate the bail until I can clear this block with the little stop on the back of the bail. Tighten the spring down completely. That'll give me a functioning bail. Now I have to reinstall the trip lever. In order to reinstall the trip lever, I make sure that I mount the spring on the block on the inside so that I have the tension for that trip lever. The other end of the spring with the hook side goes against that back wall there. Tighten this down so that it is completely tight, and yet you have a functioning tension on that, and then you're reset. All you do is reinstall the pieces and parts, and you're ready to take this reel fishing again with a bail that, well, a bail that trips. There you go. That's the 304, how to set that bail spring. I hope that this has worked out for you, that it's what you need in terms of how to set that one. It applies to many Mitchells, and if you have a Mitchell that has that little pin in the back, you better be aware just how that works. So, everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. To our first responders, thank you for everything it is that you do. I hope you find these videos enjoyable, and I hope that you take the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I'm going to go fix the rest of this reel. I'm wishing everybody a great day. Please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. Have a fantastic day.